Hello and welcome to another edition of Mailbag. What is Mailbag? Well, Mailbag is a feature of the channel where you guys leave lots of comments on the channel and I attempt to answer those comments, or if I can't answer those comments, I throw it out to you guys who have more knowledge on some of this stuff than I do. So let's get into the first mailbag of this session. Remember, like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Go over to Instagram and follow me there. Go over to Facebook, follow me there. That's where the normal notices are. And consider becoming a Patreon. Next comment or question comes from Digital Diesel. And this is in response to the Roland S50 update and the arrival of the Juno X, a video I did in May 2022. And Digital Diesel writes, great talk. Roland appears to be just selling these synth flavours in most popular versions for an appropriate shell. Jupiter, Juno, D50 maybe in the future. This is your basic factory pattern. I love the idea and I'm on board. Juno X would be my pick too. The XV5080. Everyone in my circle of influence wanted one of these in the early 2000s. Anyway, thanks for the feedback. Always welcome feedback on the channel, good or bad. Like you, I've always wanted the XV5080 back in the day. I believe it was released in 2000, but they were as normal a little expensive. Of course, my want then moved in onto the Integra, and again a little bit pricey, plus the fact that I brought a Jupiter 80 instead. There it is, my Jupiter 80. I thought long and hard about buying a Roland Jupiter X, especially as I had already bought the System 8 and both the Jupiter and Juno plug out. But the way the System 8 and the Jupiter X generate the tone is different, and that was part of the reason why I invested in the Jupiter X, which unfortunately is in storage. The other key factor was the panel layout of the Jupiter X is closer to the original Jupiter 8 that it was modelled on. The Juno X follows the same concept, but while you can load other instruments into the engine, the panel is set up to mimic the Juno 106, and therefore allows you to have a better, easier experience when working with the Juno engines. Is a D50 coming? I suspect not at the moment, but I could see a JD8000 in a format of or a Jupiter 6 maybe before too long. I really could see a Jupiter 6 actually. There's been a number of murmurings that there's something going on with a Jupiter 6 style clone. But whether they're going to release that in kind of a boutique, or whether they're going to do something like the Jupiter X, Juno X style, I have no idea. But then, you know, the problem is if Roland don't do it, will Behringer do it? Because basically the pre-sale video from the Behringer UBX looked very impressive in terms of vintage functionality and new features. They could quite easily, where these other manufacturers are basically saying they're not going to go and entertain this anymore, you know, Behringer are just saying, well, if you won't take the revenue, we're going to take the revenue. One of those things, isn't it? Next comment and question comes from Andrew Paytack. In response to Oberheim apology, Anderton's gets a UBXA video I did in May 2022. And Andrew writes, to answer the question whether an electronic instrument is worth its price tag, I'll have to wait for Marcus Fuller's teardown video of a specific synthesizer in question. For instance, when I saw the teardown of the Roland JDXA, I think the synthesizer is worth the money. Each analog voice for the JDXA has its own dedicated card. I mean the entire card for each analog voice. That's a real deal. Now, if the OBX8 has this type of architecture and separate voice card full of electronic components for each of its 8 voices, then its retail price could potentially be justified. If the UBXA achieves the same at a lower cost, surface mount components, then its price would also be fair. I'm trying to be unbiased here, since personally I'm more excited about the UBXA than the OBXA because of the UBXA features, which seem to go far beyond the original profit. Well, the UBXA wasn't a profit. But that aside, the different vintage models of the UBXA than the OBX8, because the I've said that before, the different vintage models of UBX8 are truly amazing and make the UBXA a really desirable analog synthesizer. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My point is, I really need to see the teardown of each product to understand what I'm actually paying for. The modern profit synthesizers are nearly hollow inside. If that's the case with the OBX8, then no, it's not worth the price tag. That's an interesting view, actually. What actually has gone into the machine. Now, a lot of the Behringer stuff that's coming along, and a lot of the Roland boutique stuff that's come along, is all based on this kind of analog circuitry modelling. The Behringer stuff is based on this on modelling on RISC chips, which is really, really interesting because it allows them to actually digitally model an analog circuit to produce the same output. I do find that actually incredibly, but it's interesting. It's coming in a lot of industries are kind of starting to use that to emulate legacy tech that they've got in place that they can't afford to take out because it does a specific function, but the technology that's involved means that they can no longer source spare parts for it. So I see that a lot. I see it in the industry I work in at the moment, is they're looking for solutions for a lot of this stuff. So it really is quite interesting. Anyway, it's just another take, I suppose, on how to actually judge the value of a synth. How much engineering's actually gone into the synth itself. There's probably quite a lot of value engineering in terms of the software side that you wouldn't get from looking at the inside of a synth. You just see a processor and probably some logic ROMs and that sort of stuff, and you don't see the level of engineering that's actually gone into sort of programming up the ROM chips, and how that synthesizer actually works. I also would say that one of the other things I've seen is that sort of the engineering of a synth is not necessarily always reflected in the build quality. There was a lot of engineering went into System 8 and the System 1, and yet they were plasticky as hell. They're not really quite flimsy machines, but actually the engineering that's gone into putting those together is quite a lot. So they've kind of cheaped out on the case in terms of to give you different options in terms of the synthesis. Yes, there is an argument that says cheap parts and cheap build techniques means it's going to be a cheap synth, but not necessarily all the way. I do think that some manufacturers need to sort of step up to the plate in terms of the build quality of the machine they put out there. Cheap plastic synthesizers are really not acceptable, but there is a price point as well.